Hi, my name is Ada Jones.
I'm Lexi Capel.
For our rethinking project, we decided to work with the poem The Lamb by William Blake. When we first saw it, we were like, oh, this looks really simple, but when we started reading it and actually learning about it, we realized there was a lot more going on. The poem has like a super soft, gentle vibe, almost like you're reading like a bedtime story, and that's because Blake wrote it as part of his collection of Songs of Innocence, which is all about like childhood and purity and imagination.
Yeah, and we didn't even really know the Songs of Innocence like in the beginning of the year, but once we learned about it, it really just made sense. The whole point of that book is to celebrate the way kids see the world. Everything is simple and everything is good, and everything looks just and feels magical. And The Lamb is that perfectly. It has that sounds like something a child would actually understand and enjoy.
And then when we learned about William Blake himself, he was like kind of iconic, and he wasn't a poet, he was an artist, like he illustrated his poems and printed them himself, and he hand colored the pages too, which is wild. Most poets just write the words, but Blake saw his poetry as art, and he believed imagination was more important than like the logical part of it, and he thought his childhood was the perfect state of innocence that the adults like kind of lose.
Exactly, and knowing all that helped us like understand why The Lamb feels the way it does. Blake wasn't trying to be complicated or confusing. He was actually trying to show us like the pure and like the peaceful version of the world. And the more we read about him, the children's book isn't just convenient, it's actually very close to how Blake would wanted people to experience his poetry visually, simply, and like emotionally.
But the other thing that helped us was learning about the time period, because Blake wrote in the late 1700s, and that was during the Romantic era. Once we learned about the Romantic era, we understood like the kind of vibe of it. Romantic writers were really obsessed with nature and emotions and spirituality, and especially childhood. And they wanted to get away from like the strict, cold, like logical sort of type of writing that came before them.
And on top of that, the Industrial Revolution was happening, so like everything was busy, loud, and like dirty, and a lot of mechanical things were happening. And like poets like Blake were like, no, let's go back to like nature and innocence. So the lamb basically was like a symbol of everything they thought the world was losing. The lamb like represents purity, nature, and goodness, all the things that were disappearing at the time as cities like grew and technology started like taking over.
Another thing we learned that was like really cool was Blake actually wrote poems in pairs. So The Lamb is paired with another poem called The Tiger in Songs of Experience, where the lamb is all sweet and innocent, and the tiger is kind of like the opposite, like dark and intense and like more questioning. And learning that helped us understand that The Lamb isn't just some cute animal poem. It's part of like a bigger idea and like a bigger picture that Blake had about the world, and it's like sort of like the innocent side versus the experience side.
And honestly, that helped us like rethink the poem a lot, like knowing it's the innocent poem that made us pay attention to like the tone and the language. Blake repeats things on purpose, and he uses really like soft sounding and he talks to the lamb like it's a child. Everything about it just made it seem like it's safe and gentle. So when we were figuring out our project, we were like, this poem is basically asking to be made into something that kids can read.
So when it came time to rethink it, we chose a children's book because it fits the poem's whole personality. The poem is already simple enough that kids could follow it, but beautiful enough that adults can understand the deeper meaning. And since Blake illustrated his poems originally, it felt right to take that inspiration and build it into something visual.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, we also thought about the audience. A children's book is something younger kids could actually enjoy, but it also helps older readers like us understand the poem better because turn it into like a storybook breaks it down into something visual and emotional. It makes the meaning like easier to see. Kids understand innocence naturally, and this poem speaks their language. Also, another thing we paid attention to was the message. The poem connects the lamb with creation and goodness. So Blake uses the lamb to represent innocence and also to connect religious themes of gentle, pure love. But instead of making it super religious or like heavy, we explained it in like a kid-friendly way, more like celebrating the idea that the world can be kind and gentle.
And honestly, that's another reason the children's book format works. Kids' books are usually about kindness and softness and learning like simple truths and morals of the world. And so the lamb literally fits that mold perfectly. Rethinking this format really does kind of keep truth to Blake's message as a whole and keeps it alive in a modern way.
Overall, we learned that the lamb seems simple at first, but it actually packed with so much meaning about childhood, goodness, nature, and the world Blake lived in. Understanding the poet and the time period helped us see how deep it really goes.
And that's why we chose to turn it into a children's book. It honors the poem's innocence and it connects Blake's artistic style, but it just makes the message easier for anyone, especially younger readers, to understand it. It's just a modern version of what Blake was doing back then, and it lets us rethink the poem in a way that feels fun and sweet and still true to his original vision. So yeah, I'm Ada Jones.
I'm Lexi Capel.
And this is our project.